Today, guys, we're going to learn two different things. We're going to learn about literary criticism, which is something you would study in an upper level college English course. And then we're going to learn about online databases, which is something you'll have to use for this project and absolutely for multiple classes in college. So you need to take out your note paper that you picked up when you came in for this first section. All right, so literary criticism is like a lens through which you look at literature, or you could look at art or culture, etc. But essentially, it's a different lens allows critics to consider works of art based on certain assumptions within that school of theory. Right? So the lens allows critics to focus on particular aspects of a work that they consider important. So when you're looking through literary criticism or a particular literary lens, think of it almost as an Instagram filter or whatever, Snapchat filter or thing you use today. The subject itself doesn't change. If I'm Snapchatting myself into a puppy, I'm still me, I'm still there, right? So the lens changes. I can be a puppy. I can be that thing with the flowers on my head, right? If we're looking at Instagram filters down here in the bottom corner, right, the tree is the same, but you look at it through a different lens and it changes how you see it. That's what literary theory is, right? The book or the poem or the short story will stay the same, but we're going to look at it maybe from a perspective of a feminist, or we're going to look at it through the perspective of race theory, or we're going to look at it for its historical time period. So how we look at it depends on which lens we're using. So for example, if I'm looking at Marxist theory, which you'll learn more about, I'm going to focus on just how the characters in the story interact based on their economic situation, their social class. But if I was looking at the work from post-colonial theory, I might consider the same story and look at how colonial powers like Britain or France or America, right, treat characters from, say, Africa or the Caribbean, right? So it's the same text, but I look at different elements within the text, right? Here's our first type, moral criticism and dramatic construction. This comes from our Greeks that we've been reading about, so 360 BC through present. Plato, the philosopher, gave our very first literary criticism that we have recorded in his text, The Republic. He suggested that art forms, like writing, painting, sculpture, must teach morality and ethics. This actually sounds pretty similar to Sophocles. We see that in his play. He absolutely taught us a moral lesson, right, which would be in line with what Plato and the other Greeks thought was important. And then his student Aristotle went on to describe how poems and plays should be organized, and these are our very first pieces of literature, literary criticism. So if you used a moral criticism today, you would be looking for that moral or ethical argument. Formalism was 1930s through present. This is a belief that a work has an intrinsic feature that is independent of its environment, era, or even author. That is, the key to understanding the text exists within the text itself, within its format. Okay, so this means it doesn't matter if the author was white or black, male, female, living through a war or not. The words on the page have a meaning that is independent of that context. And so we want to look at what do the words on the page specifically tell us. So you can see some questions here you might ask if you were a formalist. Psychoanalytical criticism is interesting, 1930s present. It builds on Sigmund Freud, who's a famous psychologist, his theory of psychology. So primary ideas, if you're looking at a piece of text through a psychoanalytical criticism, is people's behaviors affected by their unconscious, like the things they don't know deep in their head. Our unconscious is influenced by childhood events. And so much of this work focuses on parent-child relationships, unconscious desires, repression, which is like where you hold things from your childhood back, memory, and hidden fears. So if you were looking at this, you would look at Oedipal dynamics, the Oedipus complex, that men want to perhaps sleep with their mothers, but not literally, but kind of deep down inside of them. You would want to look at what's the psychology of the author? What does this text tell us about the author? Are there any things being repressed in this that are coming out subconsciously in the writing? You should in your government class be studying Karl Marx at some point. So this is a theory that became popular in the 1930s. Based on Karl Marx's theories, he was the founder of communism, which is an economic principle but also a philosophy. Marxist criticism focuses on class differences, social and economical, as well as complications of the capitalist system. So if we're looking at a text through a Marxist lens, right, we're really going to be looking at this inherent struggle between the wealthy and the poor, right, and how capitalism in particular is really detrimental to our lower classes. Reader response criticism is my favorite. 1960s present, it considers your reaction to the literature as being vital to interpreting the meaning of the text. So basically, what a text is inherently cannot be separated from what it does to you. So formalists said, here is the text, it means what it means, period. Reader response says that's not true, right? I bring my own background, my own interpretation, and my own feelings. Without me as a reader, the text is just words. So it doesn't have meaning until I give it meaning, and the meaning I give it is based off of my entire wealth of experience, so that text's meaning is dependent on me as a reader. I love this theory because I think that's how I read. Structuralism and semiotics. I don't actually know a lot about this. I haven't studied it much in college, but it's 1920s present. It's a linguistic study of text, so basically trying to find patterns in the structure of language or syntax in literature. How should the text be classified in terms of genre based on its structure? Looking at the text narrative operations, what can you speculate about the relationship between the text and the culture from which it emerged? What rules or codes of interpretation must be internalized in order to make sense of the text? So I didn't do a lot of structural analysis in college, but that is what this is. Post-structuralism and deconstruction is pretty interesting. This is a more contemporary mode of analysis, 1960s present. So it's this idea that language does not have a set meaning, right? That they're just words. They don't mean anything. In some sense, it's like reader response, but more abstract. So texts become plural. They have multiple meanings and interpretations. So it's really about breaking down that formality of the Victorian genre, the Romantic genre. That's all a fake construct that we've given it, that they are just words, and that a word means nothing or it means everything. So this is really abstract thinking. So really looking at how does this work contradict accepted truths in our society, but also in perhaps like a literary genre, and how does it move outside? How does it deconstruct genres or time periods of literature? New historicism or cultural studies, 1980s present. So this is really looking at the historical aspects of a text, saying that a text is really dependent upon the time period in which it was written. So you're going to look at what was happening to the author and in his or her society at that time, and how does this text function as essentially a historical artifact that tells us something about their opinions of that time period. So this is a pretty interesting way to study a text. Post-colonial criticism is like historical criticism, but it focuses specifically on colonialism. So it's going to look at literature that's produced by colonial powers and also those who were colonized, right? So looking at maybe a work of British literature or looking at a work of Indian literature and seeing how does that colonization impact what's being told. So really looking at power, economics, politics, etc. Feminist criticism is really great as well. So looking at how does literature reinforce stereotypes and oppression of women, and also what texts are able to kind of break from that. So really looking at the relationships between men and women. Like you might have noticed some of the female characters in Oedipus and Antigone, right, have this very minor role, like the wives, Eurydice and Jocasta, the queens, right? They're just kind of there on the sidelines, but then you have Antigone as this primary character. So what does that tell us about their concept of women's rights in Greece? Eco-criticism, haven't done any of this in my life, but it's looking at literature and the physical environment, so an ecological or environmental critique of literature. Critical race theory is great. 1970s, present, it's examining the appearance of race and racism in modes of expression like literature. So how does a text actually represent racist views? How does a text reflect the dominant culture's perception of race? So looking at almost like a historical document, again, looking at this text as a representation of history, but specifically at how does this text show us race relations within that society. All right, so those are all of your literary critiques. Now, I am not expecting that you have them memorized. You won't need that for the AP test. I just want you to be aware of it because I'm going to ask you in a second to find pieces of literary criticism on these databases. And I want you to be like really quick flagged if this is some sort of crazy Marxist theory and you don't want to read about that, or a deconstructionist essay, right? I want you to be aware of what you're reading so you can understand that this author's looking through a particular lens, and that if you decide to become an English major one day, you will look through these lenses as well. So what we're going to do for the rest of class is learn about databases and then access them. I hope this isn't the first time you've heard the word database, but a database is a collection of reputable sources. You will use this in college. You can ask Mr. Armstrong. You will use this in college all the time. I even used it, and it was like back when the internet was first being invented, and we used databases then. Here are a bunch of online source types: ebooks, discussion boards, websites, newspapers, academic journals, online magazines, videos, and blogs. Take a second, write 1 through 8, and rank these from 1 being the most reputable and 8 being the least reputable. Okay, you should actually be doing this, like writing down on your paper, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, whatever. This is what it should look like, okay? Peer-reviewed academic journals are really what I want you to look at. So these are things that are written by college professors. They're peer-reviewed by other college professors before they can even be published. So they are highly academic and highly reputable. Ebooks and newspapers are also great. Online magazines, it depends on the magazine. Then you get down into websites, videos, blogs, and discussion boards. Those are less reliable for the type of essay that we're writing. We are writing a piece of academic criticism of literature, so we really want to live in this top half. Okay, here's a bunch of questions, and I'm going to kind of skip through this because I think you know how to determine if something's reputable or not. Definitely look at the author. Think through, is there a reason for bias, right? Like, is this published by some crazy cat lady, or is it someone who actually has a degree in English literature? Is there a copyright? Is it active? Like, so a zombie or inactive page is something that was published, you know, like in 2001 and hasn't been updated since then. What's the purpose? Is it organized? Is it primary or secondary source, like firsthand or secondhand knowledge? So these are some things to think about. But if you go to databases, you don't have to think about that. All right, we have 3 different types of online search options. So your first one here is Google, being Yahoo, etc. That's fine. It's great, but you find everything. Again, I'm going to come back to my crazy cat lady. If I Google, Walt Whitman, there could be a blog from some crazy woman in her pajamas saying how much she loves Walt Whitman. It would not be me, even though I do love him, right? But you don't know necessarily. You have to put in a lot of work here to figure out a good source. Instead of using Google, I recommend going forward in your college career, high school career, use Google Scholar. All right, Google Scholar, just like literally Google Scholar. It's a free search engine that locks down just reputable sources, okay? So instead of Googling things for academic, start using Google Scholar. But if you're in a school like Pro-Con, or when you go to college, go a step further and use subscription databases. The schools pay for these, and it's a collection of just the most reliable and academic sources. You will have to use this in college, and you have to use it today as well. So we're going to go to TEL, Tennessee Electronic Library, TEL. If you don't ever remember how to do it, just literally Google TEL, TEL. Right? So we're going to go there. I'm going to show you what it looks like right now. This is where I want you to be living over the next couple of days. All right. Oh, look, magically it's already here. Okay, so when you get into TEL, you're going to scroll down. Don't just search here. That's too much stuff. Look at this one, Gale Literary Sources. That looks like an amazing place to look up literary research. Click on it. From here, it really does function like a Google, right? So I'm going to look up a particular title or author. What I will tell you about your poems is because poems are so small, you might have better luck looking at the author, like do author first and then maybe do an advanced search to add in the poem title. A short story or a novel, you'll be able to get an article just on that. So I'm going to do the short story Barn Burning by William Faulkner. You should read it. It's good. Maybe we'll read it next semester. Okay, here we go. And then I'm going to search. Now, what I want to show you, content types, literary criticism. Those are the articles I was just telling you about, written by college professors through a particular literary lens. These are great. Some of them might be too hard, but these are great. We're not doing a biographical study of any author, so avoid that. Now, if you feel like the literary criticism is too abstract for you, you might start with a topic and work overview. All right, so I'll show you the difference. Excuse me there. We don't really need multimedia pieces at all. Primary sources could be helpful, but I really want us to look between literary criticism or topic and work overview. So let's start with literature criticism. You have 115 articles about barn burning. Okay, patterns. Well, let's click on it. Patterns reminds me of that semiotics one. So as I'm starting to look at this was written in 1991, which is fine. It's tracing the recurring theme of solipsism in his short fiction. I don't even know what that means. Let's read and see. One of Faulkner's favorite themes is the dichotomy between life and language, the concrete and the abstract, the existential and the conceptual. But ironically, that dichotomy is also the central problem of literary criticism. Every critic must contend with the disparity between the experience of the work of art and all its complex vital immediacy and the obligation to formulate that experience, to systemize it, and to find the necessary crude and inadequate equivalents for it in a framework of language. Yeah, this is going to be a structural critique, which I personally am not interested in. So what I'm seeing here is this may be too much for you to like really understand right now. But if it's not, keep going. It's really interesting. Right, because this is where I would love for you to get with your writing, but this is going to be pretty serious. All right, so I'm going to go back. Now, some of these look a little class, character, and croppers. Maybe this is a little bit more of like a social class, Marxist theory. That could be interesting. Fathers and Son, the spiritual quest. Okay, oh, a spiritual quest is like a journey. That might be interesting. Compulsive and revisionary repetition. Oh, we're getting into the craft of writing, so maybe a structuralist one again. So you can kind of some character studies, which could be interesting. The short story genre and Faulkner's contribution to it, right? So there are a lot of options there. I'm going to go to topic work so you can see what happens there. This is going to be easier. The benefit of doing a topic overview for you and where you are right now in your literary career is it's going to help you understand the text, and then when you go to read that text, you will be able to understand it a little better. It's like me giving you a preview, and then you go to read it, and that understanding is there. And there is no shame in that. There is shame in just reading the overview and never reading the real text. All of my Spark Notes people out there. All right, so as we read this, events in history, so you can kind of look through the historical lens here. The short story in focus, so kind of looking at the short story itself, looking at the class differences here. All right, so this one might be a better one. Events in history at the time it was written. Okay, something else I want to show you about these, you will have to do a works cited page. The great thing about databases is, guess what? They give you the citation. It's right here. All you have to do is just write it down or copy it and put it into your document. You don't have to do anything else. So that's great. Other things that I want to show you about this website, I know I'm talking forever, sorry. You can email it to yourself, or you can email it to me and I'll print it for you. Wouldn't that be nice? You can download it, which you can't actually do on your iPad, so don't do that. You can print it, which you can't do on the iPad, so don't do that. You can save it somehow. I don't know. You can download an MP3. If you do this on your phone, download it as an MP3 and you can listen to it on your bus ride. Awesome. All right, so I do recommend that you email it to me and to you. all right, if you find one that you really like. So my name, remember, Kathleen.Turnmeyer@mnps.org, right? And then sender email, that would be you, blah, 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 blah. All right, and then in your message, put please print, and Armstrong and I will print them for you. Okay, there you go, and then send. Okay, if you do that, I'll print it so you can do your annotations, which is a grade that's coming up. All right, I'm done with tell. Access it, use it, ask Mr. Armstrong or me when I get back, and we will help you with that. Last things, Blackboard due dates. Go to Blackboard, AP English, assignments, second 9 weeks, and then you will find these things. Theme and titles, that's due today, all right? So you're going to have to tell me, I want to do blah, blah, blah theme, this poem, the short story, and the authors. You can get 100 points by just putting those 5 pieces of information in there. Wouldn't that be lovely? It's due by 11:59 tonight. It will totally disappear off of Blackboard next week, and if it disappears off Blackboard, you are out of luck. Then the other things due on Blackboard, December 9th, you need to have the full outline of your poem and your short story. We will have some time to work on that in class, but recognize those are due at 11:59 on those dates, and again, it'll disappear a couple days after that. If you turn it in late, it's going to be late. All right, critical essays. You have to read and annotate one critical essay over your poem and one critical essay over your short story this semester. You'll do another one next semester. The annotated texts have to be submitted on December 1st at the start of class, which means you have to find these essays, print them off, annotate them, right, and give them to me. So next class, I'm going to give you the rubric that I'm going to use to grade that, and I'll show you a sample one. All right, why are we doing this? You're going to actually integrate this into your final essay. Most people, when they write about literature, bring in reputable sources, so you're going to do that as well. But you're also looking for a deeper understanding of your text, other views of how you could write about this, ideas for your argument that you're trying to make, and it's going to show you how could you organize and structure and write at the college level, right? So December 1st at the start of class, you have to have read and annotated one critical essay over your poem and one critical essay over your short story. So today, submit your titles and theme statement to Blackboard, begin your database search, and email 1 to 2 articles to me for printing. If you did not ever look at your titles and themes, I would start there because it's due today. All right? Oh, that's it. Bye, guys. Have fun working.